Today you will hear the testimony of Youssef Al-Mansur, a former Hamas fighter who believed he was serving God while sinking deeper and deeper into the darkness of war. He lost everything: his wife, his faith, and his sense of purpose. Until one night, alone and on the verge of giving up, something unexpected appeared on his phone screen: a video by Charlie Kirk. At first, it was just another American talking about faith. But those words pierced Youssef's heart like a ray of light amid the ruins. What began as curiosity turned into confrontation, and what seemed impossible became a supernatural encounter that would change everything, even the fate of other men who once fought by his side. Get ready, because this story will challenge everything you believe about redemption and forgiveness. And before we begin, make sure you are subscribed, like the video, and tell me where you are watching from, because this story is going to touch you deeply.
I grew up in Gaza, surrounded by sounds that still echo in my mind. The wail of sirens, the distant blasts of attacks, the cries of children, and the tense silence that always followed. For as long as I can remember, I was taught that faith and war were the same thing. To be faithful meant to fight. To believe was to obey, and to doubt was to betray. My father was a respected leader in the community, a man with a stern gaze and a voice no one dared to challenge. He taught me that courage was proof of devotion and that dying for the cause was the highest form of honor. I grew up trying to be the perfect son, the ideal soldier, the man he wanted me to be. By the age of 17, my hands were already marked by the weapon he placed in them, not as a choice but as destiny. I prayed 5 times a day, and each prayer felt like an automatic ritual, an empty repetition that hid my fear. I said the right words, performed the correct gestures, but inside me there was only silence. A heavy, cold, suffocating silence. On the outside, I was the example everyone expected: disciplined, faithful, confident. But inside, something within me cried out for meaning. I did not know what peace was, and perhaps that is why I believed war was the only answer. Amina, my wife, was different. She had a gentle look, the kind that seemed to understand others' pain without them needing to say a word. She spoke of a kind of love I could not comprehend, a love that asked for nothing in return, that did not impose itself through fear, but through kindness. Sometimes when I came back from the base covered in dust and memories I tried to erase, she would just hug me. She said nothing, and that confused me, because what I feared most, deep down, was discovering that she was right. That maybe the world did not need more armed men, but transformed men. Still, I hardened my heart. I told myself that peace was weakness, that forgiveness was betrayal. I believed I was defending something sacred when, in truth, I was only trying to give meaning to the emptiness growing inside me. Over time, that emptiness became a weight, but I learned to carry it as part of my armor, till one day that armor began to crack. It was in the early hours of the morning. The air was heavy and the sky covered in smoke. I was on a mission, far from the neighborhood where Amina was staying. Suddenly, a deafening sound tore across the horizon. A flash lit up the darkness. Communication went down. And for a moment, I knew. I ran as if the world were collapsing beneath my feet. At every corner, every shattered wall, I shouted her name. When I finally found her, time stopped. My hands trembled, her body was still, and all that remained was an echo. The distant sound of a life that had ended. In that moment, something inside me broke. For the first time, I no longer wanted to fight. I no longer wanted to breathe or pray. I felt hatred for everything, for the enemies, for the allies, for myself, and even for God. I spent days wandering in silence, staring at the ruins as if they were the reflection of my soul. I had given everything for faith, and in return I received nothing. I began to wonder if God existed, and if he did, why he had allowed this. The nights became an endless desert. I could no longer sleep. I sat in front of my phone, scrolling through the screen as if searching for a reason not to lose my mind. That's how it happened. A video appeared among the recommendations, an American talking about faith, purpose, and truth. Charlie Kirk. I had no idea who he was, but something in the title provoked me. Truth does not fear questions. Those words seemed to challenge me. At first, I laughed. I thought it was just another propaganda video and almost skipped it. But something, perhaps desperation, perhaps curiosity, made me watch. He spoke with conviction, yet calmly. He did not use hatred. He did not shout. He simply explained what it meant to know the truth that sets you free. And I found myself angry at it, because deep down I wanted to believe there was nothing to be freed from. In the days that followed, I started watching more videos. At first, it was out of pure anger. I wanted to find flaws, to prove that this man was wrong. But the more I watched, the more something inside me began to move. It was as if his words found cracks in my heart and entered through them. He spoke about forgiveness, about grace, about a God who does not seek warriors, but children. And that unsettled me. One night, after watching a talk where he quoted the words of Jesus, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you," something inside me simply collapsed. I turned off the phone, but those words kept echoing. I began to cry, first quietly, then with all the strength of someone who had been holding back years of pain. Suddenly, the atmosphere around me changed. I cannot explain it with human words. The light in the room became different, soft, almost golden. A warmth replaced the cold I had felt for so long. It was in that moment that I heard something. It was not a sound coming from outside. It was a voice within me, but it was not mine. A gentle, firm voice that said, "I have called you by name. You are mine." I felt the ground disappear beneath me. My body fell to its knees, and I cried in a way I had never cried before. It was as if the weight of my entire life was being ripped from me, layer by layer. There was no fear, no guilt, only a peace I had never experienced before. A living peace, breathing within me. I lay there on the ground for minutes that felt like hours. When I opened my eyes, everything seemed the same, but nothing was the same. There was no heavenly vision, no visible proof, only a certainty that burned in my chest. I had been reached. I, the man who hated everything that name represented, now wept before him. That night, something changed forever. I still didn't understand what was happening, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. It was the beginning of something that went far beyond my comprehension. I didn't know that this voice, this presence, this silent call, would still lead me to face a much deeper war. Not against men, but within myself. For a while I tried to deny what I had felt. I told myself it was just exhaustion, hallucination, grief. But the more I tried to forget, the more that memory haunted me. And every time I saw Amina's face in my dreams, it was as if she were telling me, "You need to understand what you saw." The following weeks were confusing. I still wore the same clothes, walked the same streets, but everything seemed different. The sound of prayers no longer touched me in the same way. The words I had repeated since childhood now seemed empty, lifeless. I felt that something greater was calling me, but I didn't know where to go. That's when I went back to Charlie Kirk's videos. But this time not to discuss, to understand. He spoke about Jesus with a clarity I had never heard before, about a God who doesn't demand blood, but offers his, about a love that isn't bought with obedience, but received with repentance. And those words began to rebuild something within me. I spent hours watching, sometimes pausing to cry, sometimes laughing at myself for being so moved by something I had despised for years. But it was real. Something inside me was awakening, and for the first time I wanted to know more. I wanted to know that Jesus who spoke with compassion, even to those who hated him. There was still no tangible proof, no visible miracle, only a promise. But that promise was enough to keep me standing. I couldn't explain what was happening, I only knew that something sacred was stirring within me. And deep down, I felt that this was just the first page of a new story. A story I would never have the courage to invent, but that God, somehow, was already writing for me. The following days were strange. I walked around like someone carrying a secret they couldn't explain. I slept little, thought too much. That voice, that presence I felt that morning, wouldn't leave me in peace. It was as if a new heart was being born inside me, but my body still carried the weight of the old one. I began to feel a weakness I didn't understand. Strange pains in my chest, a constant fever, and a weariness that drained my strength. At first I thought it was stress, maybe grief, maybe something psychological. But deep down, I knew Something spiritual was happening. One afternoon the pain intensified. It was as if an invisible hand was squeezing my heart. Cold sweat poured down my face, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was alone, and for a moment I thought this would be the end. I lay on the floor and closed my eyes. Everything inside me screamed for help. That's when, for the first time, something changed within me. I didn't pray as before. I didn't search for the words I learned as a child. I simply whispered, between groans and tears, "Jesus, if you are real, if what I felt is true, help me now." At that moment, something happened. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a physical transformation. The pain simply disappeared. The heat that burned my body was replaced by a peace so profound it seemed to touch my soul. I felt a different pulse in my chest, a lighter, firmer, more vibrant heartbeat. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew something supernatural had just reached me. Hours later, I managed to get up. I was still trembling, but not from fear. It was reverence. I knelt and cried until I had no more tears. For the first time, I didn't cry for Amina, nor for myself. I cried out of gratitude. I knew I was no longer alone. That night, I decided to go to a hospital. Part of me still wanted to be sure that what happened wasn't just a figment of my imagination. The doctor examined me with an expression I'll never forget. He ran the tests, looked at the results, looked at me again and asked, "Have you had any treatment recently?" I replied no. He leaned on the table, confused. "Your heart was under intense stress and trauma, right? Well, now it's perfect. No sign of damage. It's as if it's been completely renewed." I didn't know what to say. He spoke with the serenity of someone trying to find a logical explanation for the inexplicable. I just nodded. The nurse who was with me, a man with a simple smile and a calm gaze, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Perhaps God is giving you a new mission, Youssef." That phrase echoed inside me for the rest of the day. A new mission. The words struck me like lightning. I spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, reviewing everything I had lived through. My childhood, the battles, the loss, my voice, the healing. Nothing seemed like a coincidence anymore. The God I had tried to deny was calling me, and I knew there was no turning back. In the following days, I began to feel an uncontrollable urge to learn more about Jesus. Each page of the Bible seemed to pulse, alive, as if God himself were teaching me to read the world in a new way. But along with this discovery came fear. What would happen if the people around me found out? And I didn't have to wait long. The news spread like wildfire. First, suspicious glances, then whispers, and then threats. One of my old comrades came up to me and said in a cold tone, "They say you betrayed your faith, that now you speak the name of the enemy." I didn't answer. I just looked at him and said, "I found a peace that none of us ever found." He turned around, calling me crazy, but I knew it was only the beginning of the storm. Within days, my family found out. The shock was devastating. My father, the same man who taught me everything, looked into my eyes with a mixture of fury and pain. "You have dishonored our family name. You are no longer my son." His words were like blades cutting through me. I loved him, even with all the wounds he had inflicted on me. But there, before him, I realized that following Jesus would come at a high price. I had to leave everything behind. Friends, memories, roots. I took with me only a small backpack and the Bible the nurse had given me. I crossed the border into Egypt without knowing where to go. Each step was a mixture of fear and faith. I had no home, no direction, but I felt that God was with me. And somehow that was enough. In Egypt, I found shelter in a small guest house, a simple place with stained walls and the distant sounds of the market. I spent weeks in hiding, avoiding contact with acquaintances. The world that once applauded me now wanted me dead. But paradoxically, it was there, in the silence, in the solitude, that I felt God's presence most strongly. She read the Bible in secret, hiding the pages among other books. Each verse was like fire and healing at the same time. When she read the words of Jesus saying, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," I was crying, because I finally understood what it meant to have a path, something I had never had until then. But it wasn't all light. There were nights when the weight of longing crushed me. I dreamed of Amina. I saw her smile, heard her voice calling my name, and woke up with my heart in pieces. Sometimes I looked at the sky and asked, Lord, if I have already found you, why does the pain still continue? Silence was the answer. A silence that at first bothered me, but that gradually began to teach me. I learned that God also speaks in silence, that He doesn't erase the past, but redeems it. And it was in this painful process that I understood that following Jesus is not about running away from pain. It's about finding purpose within it. One day, while walking through the streets of Cairo, I passed a small church hidden among shops. The sound of chants echoed softly through the half-open door. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to go in, part of me was still afraid. Afraid of being recognized, afraid of not being accepted. But an invisible force pushed me inside. The people sang with their eyes closed and hands raised. There was no ostentation, no power, only surrender. I sat in the back trying to hide, but soon a man came to me. It was the pastor. He gave me a sincere smile and simply said, "You're welcome here, brother." That word, brother, it broke me down. I, who no longer had a family, found a new one there. From that day forward, I began attending services in silence, observing, learning. Each testimony I heard reminded me that I was not alone. Others, too, had come from the shadows into the light. Others, too, had left everything behind for the sake of the truth. But even amidst communion, there were still moments when the past came knocking. Sometimes I dreamed of the sound of Gaza's sirens, the screams, the smell of smoke. I would wake up in a cold sweat, wondering if I would ever truly be free from it. It was in those moments that I learned something powerful. The freedom Jesus offers is not the absence of memory, it is victory over it. One day, sitting by the Nile, I felt the wind on my face and heard that same gentle voice within me, not in words but with certainty. It said, "It's not over yet. I healed you. But now I want to use you." I felt a shiver run through my entire body. I understood that the miracle wasn't just physical. The heart He had healed wasn't just the organ that beats in the chest. It was the spiritual heart, wounded by years of hatred and guilt. The true miracle was being alive inside, after being dead while alive for so long. The following weeks were transformative. I began writing notes about everything God was teaching me. Verses, prayers, memories. It was as if He were rebuilding every piece of me, brick by brick. Sometimes I laughed alone. Other times I cried. But in all these emotions there was peace. And while this new life blossomed within me, something unexpected was happening outside. News, rumors, threats. My former companions began hunting for my location. They discovered I was still alive. One of them even sent a message saying, "You can change your name, but you'll never stop being a traitor." I deleted the message, closed my eyes, and prayed. I didn't ask for protection. I asked for strength to forgive. And in that moment I realized that the miracle wasn't just surviving. It was being able to love even those who wanted to see me dead. The desert that surrounded me was now becoming a sanctuary. The man once forged for war was learning to live in peace, and though I didn't yet know it, that silent faith growing within me was about to be tested again, in a way that would change everything once more. The years passed like a wind that changes the desert, slowly but irreversibly. When I finally managed to settle down in USA, everything seemed so different that sometimes I doubted my own story. The silence of the streets at night, the gentle noise of the traffic, the freedom to walk without fear, all of this still amazed me. I had left behind the sound of bombs and the smell of smoke. But certain memories don't fade with time. They sleep within us, waiting for the right moment to awaken. In the first few months, I lived simply. I worked odd jobs and spent my evenings studying English with the Bible always by my side. It was like relearning how to exist. Gradually, I began to visit small churches, initially just to listen. People welcomed me with a love I didn't know existed. No one asked me where I came from. Everyone asked me how I was doing. And that question, so simple, moved me more than any speech. One day, the pastor invited me to give a brief testimony. He said that perhaps my story could strengthen someone. I hesitated, trembling inside. Telling my past meant opening wounds that still hurt. But at the same time, there was a voice inside me that said, "Don't hide what I did." I took a deep breath and climbed onto the small pulpit. The words came out with difficulty at first, but soon they flowed like a river that had long wanted to run. When I finished, the church was silent. A silence different from that of war. It was a silence of reverence, of transformation. People were crying, others were praying softly. After that day, I was never the same again. I started receiving invitations from other churches, small communities, and prayer groups. I always told my story with humility, not as a hero, but as someone who had been rescued from darkness by God's grace. And the more I spoke, the more I realized that this testimony wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who thought they were too far away to be reached. But then, something unexpected happened. One morning, while I was reading messages on my social network, I saw a name that sent shivers down my spine. It was Khalid, one of the men I myself had trained years ago, when I was still part of the Hamas cell. He was younger than me, but already carried the same hard look, the same blind pride that once dominated me. I hadn't seen that name for over a decade. I opened the message. The words were short, dry, laden with fury. "Traitor, you will pay for this." For a moment, I felt an old fear pounding in my chest, as if the past had caught up with me. I turned off my phone and walked to the window. Outside, the sun shone peacefully on the Florida streets, but inside me, the shadows were beginning to stir again. For a moment, I thought about deleting my social media, disappearing, starting over somewhere else. But something inside me whispered, "Don't run away. Show me what I've done in you." That night, I knelt on the living room floor and prayed. I asked for wisdom, not revenge. I asked for love, not fear. And then, without planning, I recorded a video. I looked straight at the camera, and with my heart racing, I began to speak. Years ago, I hated. I believed that destroying was serving. But today, I have learned that true power lies in forgiveness. If you are listening to me and feel anger, if you believe that violence can give meaning to your life, I understand you. I was like you. But I want to tell you one thing. There is a love that is stronger than revenge. Jesus said, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." And I pray for you, my brother. May God show you the peace that I have found. I sent the video with trembling hands. Part of me thought no one would see it. But in the following hours, it began to spread. A friend shared it. Then another. And within a few days, thousands of people were commenting, sharing, translating. I read messages from places I never imagined I would reach. From Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, even Gaza. Some called me crazy, others a traitor, but many wrote things that made me cry. "I also want to know this Jesus. You made me think." I never imagined hearing words like that from someone like you. The video went viral. And then, something even more surprising happened. A week later, I received another message. It was from the same man, Khalid, but the tone was different. He wrote, "I don't know what's happening to me. Since I saw your video, I haven't been able to sleep. I need to understand this peace you talk about. Can you pray for me?" I stared at the screen, tears welling in my eyes. That was the man who once vowed to destroy me, now asking for prayer. I took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, I can, and I'm already praying." That night I knelt again, but this time I didn't pray for myself. I prayed for him. I asked that the same love that had set me free would also reach his heart. And when I finished, a profound certainty washed over me. The enemy was now being defeated with love. In the following months, we continued exchanging messages. He started watching the videos I translated, reading the verses I sent, and one day he wrote to me, "I finally understand. What you have isn't a religion. It's peace." It was like a mirror of the past shattering before my eyes. I saw for the first time that the miracle God had performed in me was now multiplying in others. And that's when I realized God didn't just save me. He sent me back, not with weapons, but with words. Today, my life is completely different. I wake up every morning before sunrise and pray, "Lord, use my story to heal other stories." I volunteer with a Christian organization that supports families in war zones. I translate faith-based videos into Arabic and spend hours chatting online with people who are experiencing the same kind of confusion and despair that I once did. Many of them don't believe me at first. They think it's impossible for someone to change so much. But then when I share my testimony, I see something happen. Their eyes fill with tears, their voices tremble, and they say, "If God could reach you, maybe there's still hope for me." With each new encounter, I realize how forgiveness is a force that transforms the impossible. There is no greater battlefield than the human heart, and it is in this field that the love of Christ triumphs every day in silence. I remember the nights I hid in fear, and now I walk through churches, events, and even prisons, recounting what God has done. Not because I want to be remembered, but because I know there are many Youssefs in the world. Men and women trying to find meaning amidst the ruins. Every word I share is a seed, and sometimes when discouragement tries to return, I remember the words of Jesus, "Freely you have received, freely give." In every face I see, I perceive a piece of my own story. Men who have lost everything, women who carry invisible scars, young people who believe there is no more forgiveness. And I say to them all, there is a way. There is a name that changes everything. Traveling has become part of my routine. I've been to Arab communities in the United States, to small churches where only 10 people gathered, and to packed conferences where hundreds listened in silence. Each time the emotion is the same. Recounting what Jesus has done in me still makes me tremble. Not because I'm afraid, but because I never want to lose the wonder of grace. Sometimes when night falls and everything is quiet, I look at the sky and think of my wife. Men, I feel she would smile to see who I've become. Because the man she knew, the one who believed faith was proven with blood, no longer exists. What remains is a new man, a healed heart, shaped not by war, but by mercy. And that's why I never keep quiet. Because I know what it's like to live without hope. I know what it's like to believe that God is distant, and I know above all what it's like to be found by Him. Today, when I look back, I realize that the true miracle wasn't just my physical healing, nor the rediscovery of faith. The true miracle was forgiveness. Because forgiving those who hurt me is what completely set me free. I understood that no one is too far from God's love. No mistake, no past, no guilt is great enough to separate someone from grace. If the Lord could reach me, a man who lived immersed in darkness, He can transform any heart, even one that the world has already given up on. Hate is something that is learned. It is taught, nurtured, repeated, until it seems part of one's identity. But forgiveness is revelation. It comes from above, breaks invisible chains, and opens paths that once seemed impossible. True victory lies not in destroying the enemy. It lies in seeing them saved. It lies in looking at the one who hurt you and feeling compassion instead of anger. It lies in understanding that God's justice is perfect and that love always wins, even when the world says it's impossible. And perhaps, as you listen to me now, there is a war within you similar to the one that once existed within me. Perhaps you carry hatred, guilt, fear. But know this: God still writes new stories. I am living proof of that. I still get emotional when I remember the words that changed everything. I called you by name. You are mine. Those words continue to echo every day, reminding me that, even in ruins, God builds new beginnings. And who knows, at this very moment, someone on the other side of the screen might be about to experience the same miracle. Not by chance, but because the same God who found me is now calling you too.
And if you've made it this far, your heart is probably still racing, and rightly so. Youssef Al-Mansur's story is one of those that reminds us that no one is beyond the reach of God's grace. A man who lived surrounded by war, who lost everything and yet was found by Jesus. This is living proof that the love of Christ transcends borders, religions, and even the hardest heart. When Youssef first pronounced the name of Jesus, he not only received physical healing, he received a new identity, and today, the same man who once preached hatred now teaches forgiveness. That is the power of the gospel, to transform the impossible into a miracle. And if this story touched your heart as it touched mine, check if you're already subscribed to the channel, leave your like, and write in the comments. I love Jesus. Let's see how far this testimony of faith can reach. And if you prepare, because what comes next is simply unbelievable. In the next video, which is already appearing on the screen, you will hear the story of a Muslim imam who converted after his own son debated Charlie Kirk. A twist that no one expected and that will leave you speechless. So click now, stay with me, and get ready to see. Yet another proof that Jesus still transforms hearts all over the world, because stories like Youssef's are just the beginning of what God is still doing.